In this episode of our program, Dr. Anna Kulińska, Senior Associate, our expert from the tax practice, who coordinates the state aid group, will explain what conditions must be met by foreign subsidies for the companies investing within the European Union, including in Poland. Anna advises on state aid and assists clients in raising financial support from Polish and foreign sources. In M&A transactions, she examines whether the conditions for receipt of state aid have been met and maintained. Later, we'll hear an update on the Polish economy.
Hi, in this episode I will be discussing the principal issues arising from the EU regulation on foreign subsidies distorting the internal market, or FSR for short. FSR is of practical importance for those companies planning to invest in the European Union and at the same time also receive financial support from third countries. This episode is therefore addressed to multinational enterprises engage in mergers and acquisitions or public procurement procedures in the EU, including foreigners acting as board members in Polish companies, foreign investors in Poland, and their foreign advisors. FSR is a new legal regime that makes it difficult for companies to know when they need to report subsidies from outside the EU. It's worth noting that FSR has been in force in principle for more than a year, since July 2023, but there are still very few multinationals that have taken FSR into account. In examining the foreign subsidies regulation, the first question to be answered is what is the purpose of this legislation? FSR introduces a new unprecedented control regime designed to ensure a level playing field for all companies operating in the single market. Under FSR, the European Commission is empowered to investigate any foreign subsidy falling within the remit of this legislation, regardless of sector in question. In order to fulfill this obligation, the Commission may rely on information from a variety of sources. Furthermore, the Commission may also conduct a review of foreign subsidies based on prior notification submitted by a company. This is particularly relevant in the context of large concentrations and procurement procedures exceeding certain thresholds. In accordance with this regulation, the European Commission is empowered to conduct, on its own initiative, reviews of foreign subsidies that may have a distortive impact. In case where this impact is confirmed, the Commission may impose significant penalties, including fines, the repayment of subsidies, or the divestment of companies. Let's take a look at the most important question arising from FSR. What are foreign subsidies? Foreign subsidies regulation targets foreign financial contributions granted by non-EU countries to companies operating in the EU single market. Financial contributions can take the form of grants, capital injections, fiscal incentives, loans, but also guarantees, concessions, or compensations for public services. FSR applies to financial contributions from central government institutions and public entities at all other levels, as well as private entities whose actions are attributed to a third country. The attribute of statehood also applies to foreign public bodies whose actions are considered to be those of a third country. In such cases, the organizational structure of the public administration and the legislation in force in that country are taken into account. The subsidy should be selective, meaning it must benefit a specific group. It also must distort the internal market. A risk of distortion will arise if the total amount of the subsidy to a company exceeds 4 million euros over 3 consecutive years. It's worth underlining that foreign subsidy will create high probability of market distortion when the foreign subsidy was granted to a company in difficulty, or the state has given an unlimited guarantee to cover the debts or claims of the company, or the foreign subsidy in question has the effect of facilitating concentration, and also when the foreign subsidy enables the company to make an unfairly advantageous offer. Bearing in mind that FSR refers to financial contributions of a selective nature granted by third countries in favor of undertakings which are likely to distort the conditions of competition in the internal market, it's important to check that all these conditions are in place by answering the questions. Has the financial contribution been granted by the state? Is the contribution selective in nature? Does the contribution distort the internal market? And finally, does the negative impact of the subsidy outweigh the positive impact? A foreign subsidy can affect competition in the internal market depending on how much and what kind of subsidy it is. There is no distortion if the total amount of a foreign subsidy to a company does not exceed 200,000 euros per third country for 3 consecutive years. As I mentioned, FSR requires companies to notify certain large concentrations. That means large mergers and acquisitions and procurement proceedings. If at least one of the merging companies is based in the EU and has a turnover of at least 500 million euros, or if the companies have received more than 50 million euros from other countries, the European Commission must be informed. In the context of public procurement procedure, it's necessary to check the estimated value of contract in question. The threshold for this is 250 million euros. Additionally, it's important to verify whether the financial contributions granted in the 3 years prior to notification reach at least 4 million euros per third country. It's important to note that in the event of change in control, whether at the individual or corporate level, the acquiring party is required to notify the European Commission. However, when joint control is involved, the notification is made jointly by all parties involved. In the case of public procurement procedure, the contractor is obliged to make a notification. Concluding, in my opinion, it's worth considering the foreign subsidy regulation from multiple angles. On the one hand, FSR aims to ensure fair competition within the EU's internal market by addressing distortions caused by foreign subsidies. On the other hand, the implementation of FSR may present certain challenges. Additionally, there could be concerns about the regulation's impact on foreign investment and trade relations. Ultimately, the success of FSR will depend on its effective enforcement and the ability of businesses to navigate its requirements. It will be interesting to observe how this regulation shapes the market dynamics in the incoming years.
The inflow of foreign direct investment into Poland is weakening. It is said that one of the reasons for this situation is that some foreign investors classify Poland as a frontline country, threatened by the spread of the war going on beyond our eastern border in Ukraine. Paradoxically, however, since the outbreak of war in Ukraine, Poland's military security and incidentally energy security has improved considerably. Firstly, the leaders of investment in Poland are Germany, the United States, the United Kingdom and France. These are NATO countries that intensively support Ukraine and will also support our country militarily if Poland is threatened. Formally, they are obliged to do so by Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and logically by defending their companies' investments in our country. Secondly, in recent years, Poland has purchased huge quantities of weapons from the USA and South Korea and is intensively developing its own production of modern armaments. This significantly increases Poland's own defense capabilities. Thirdly, Poland has become independent of gas from Russia, replacing it with gas from Norway. Fourthly, as a result of Sweden and Finland joining NATO and Ukraine defending its independence, Poland's geopolitical situation has improved. The Baltic Sea has become the inner sea of the North Atlantic Alliance countries. So the Königsberg region, a Russian exclave on Poland's northern border, is already surrounded by NATO countries. The straight-line distance from the Finnish border to St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's hometown, is less than 200 kilometers. So NATO has moved closer to Russia. In contrast, an independent Ukraine pushes Russia away from Poland and will be our ally, even if it does not formally join NATO. Thank you for watching this episode. See you next time.